Hi, Allie.
Hey.
Welcome to episode number
5.
5. Thank you.
Thank you for welcoming me to this episode.
I'm so glad to have you. I've been so interested to hear from you. I've got
it's
some
been
good
so
questions.
long since we last talked.
I know. When?
Adam and I only talk when we're recording podcasts.
Yeah, weekly.
So if you're interested in our marriage podcast that will come out soon, that's our biggest tip is just host a podcast and
Then
only
you have
talk
to
then.
talk. Yeah. And then we just start making more podcasts so we can talk to each other more often. True. So today, what I want to talk about is I'm excited to ask you a little bit about how you balance your personal style and aesthetic.
Like what I wear.
Like what you wear. Yeah, how you pick like your clothes every day. No, like with the photography and design and art and branding that you make. And then how you balance, you as a creative artist person, also taking care of clients and making sure they get what they want and what they're excited about. I know a lot of creatives probably struggle with that thing of saying like, this is my style, but also I want to give people what they want or ask for.
Yeah.
But then also, I know a lot of people who hire creatives really struggle with how do I tell them what I want or how do I give them feedback? Our friends who own other businesses or hire creatives sometimes will ask us to help them give feedback to somebody else when they're kind of stuck in a creative project. So I'd just love to hear a little from you about that.
Awesome.
So the first question I have for you is this. How have you personally developed your own aesthetic and style of what you create and make as an artist?
You enunciated really well.
Thanks.
That was really good.
That's what I'm working on.
I'm proud of
I've got a little bit of a cough hiding.
Yeah.
And so I'm just waiting for myself to cough a lot of times. And so I'm just thankful when it doesn't
You're just
happen.
making it through. No, that's a good question. I feel like I grew up making a lot of things, specifically more fine art, and I was just copying reality. I was just painting something so that it looked real. I would sketch pictures of someone and it would just need to look real. And so that's a completely different kind of skill set, and I don't think you ever really find your style because it needs to look like a picture.
You were just mimicking photos or other
and I was really good at it to the point where it's like very accurate, but no one is like, oh my gosh, you should do an illustration of me and my family that I'll frame so that it looks like an illustration.
When you were young, how old were you when people first paid you to do paintings or things like, or make art?
Probably between the ages of like 12 and 18.
Yeah. So when you were
making things for people.
So when you were 12, people would pay you to paint photos of them or recreate photos of their kids or
their house.
Pictures of their house, things like that.
Yeah. So it wasn't until college that I was needing to make something from nothing. Obviously, painting a picture of a house or a portrait there's nothing on the canvas and then you make something, but I had to come up with branding or a website, and I wasn't just mimicking something, and I really didn't know what I liked. I followed a lot of my peers. I was more of a follower, I think, in different painting classes that I was in. I would latch onto the things that they were doing and sort of figure it out from there. It was a really safe place to do that. Nobody felt like, I don't think like anyone was copying them. I think everyone just ended up feeling their work felt like a lot of it was the same to me.
And even when you were working on branding projects, you're kind of asked to not copy things.
Yeah, you can't make something that feels like, Airbnb's logo. That's not like the goal. So I also think, graduating during the recession, that my early freelance work and career and even my office jobs, the work that I was making was not glamorous. I was not getting featured on blogs because the work that I was doing was so innovative, inspiring. It was very methodical, tedious work that I got paid for. And that's it. So I didn't go into this career or industry with an ego. I was very like, I don't know. Yeah. I have a visual aesthetic in that I think I can make this look the best it can be.
Yeah.
So, now I feel like I really like a mix of everything. I like modern, old, clean, dark, bright, rough, anything. I can find a reason why I like it. And sometimes it feels connected and sometimes it doesn't. I look much more for inspiration in interior design, art, video, literature, and not so much following other creative people.
Yeah.
The creative people that I follow online are people that I actually have talked to, either online or in person. But I'm not really following other designers. I will take a look at what they're doing, but I don't follow them.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. It's interesting to me because I know in your journey of being an artist that you probably didn't feel like you had an aesthetic or you had your own style for a while. But I would hear my friends or sometimes if I was meeting with a client and you weren't, like they could see your style before you could, kind of. So talk a little bit about, like, do you today, Allie, age 30, do you feel like you have a style and aesthetic? And if so, when did that happen? Or when did you start to feel like you kind of came into that or, settled in on something?
As of late, I feel like I see trends in my work. The person who I work most closely with every day is probably, besides you, is our developer who builds the websites that we make. And he would make comments. His name's Matt. I know he listens. Hey, Matt. He'll say things like, oh, you've been doing this a lot lately. Or, oh, things are kind of like overlappy. You've been doing that a lot. And I won't even really notice it until he says it. I think of them more as getting into ruts than a style.
Okay.
I think especially with fonts and how they look online, I can get into a rut where I really like 10 fonts and I need to kind of break out of that.
Yeah. We had to really watch that early on when we worked with some higher profile blogs because all of the other blogs that worked with us after that would be like, oh, I like that thing.
Font, yeah.
I specifically want this font. And we're like, okay, this is going to be...
And nobody owns a font. Like,
right.
You can't be like, oh, I use Brandon Grotesques and no one else can.
Yeah.
But you definitely can avoid it as a designer. I hear from people that they think, oh, I could tell that you made that. Or they might find something that I like and they think that I made it and I didn't. So... I think it's very much more subtle.
What are things that people think that you made but you didn't?
What's an example? Even locally, I can't think of an example right now, but there will be, we just did a lot of work and we still work with Lit Life Plus Yoga Studio here, which is a yoga studio. It's beautiful. I've done from photography to web design to rolling out their branding into everything, but I did not design their logo.
Right.
And so it's easy for people to say, oh, I love their logo. And I say all the time, I didn't make it, but I made everything around
everything except the logo.
And actually it was a huge lesson and an amazing experience for me to learn that so much happens after the logo. And there's been a lot of different times where I only make the logo.
Right.
And I miss out on a lot.
Yeah.
And so, it kind of gave me a really cool perspective. Anyways, we can talk more about that. But I don't feel like I have a specific enough style for it to feel like I have a style.
So you still don't feel as if you do?
No, not really.
That is hilarious to me.
I think that I have a bias and a foundation of what I know and what I like. Yeah. But I don't think our clients come to us because they're obsessed with the work that we do. I think they like how we think about branding and business.
So
I think they like the work that we do, but I don't think they say... I often find that people who are very obsessed with a creative person they know they're going to get something like that. And I don't necessarily think our clients have that expectation.
They don't show up being like, oh, I've seen everything you do. Just give me a thing that's exactly like all the other things that you've done.
Yeah, I see that. Like I see some designers who do, a lot of their work looks the same, but it's very good. Other designers don't really care about my work. Other designers aren't like, oh my gosh, I saw that website you did for that personal executive coach. I was like, I love it. They don't say that to me. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I could see someone maybe taking the path that I took and that really bothering them. But I think people, I don't know, it's weird. I think people talk to me about everything else.
Yeah.
Which I like.
It's always fascinating to me that typically a new client or someone who wants to start working with us, they will usually really like something or some of the projects that we've done. And they might even say things like, oh, I didn't really care for something else.
Yeah.
Which I think you have such a, I've observed in you versus other creative people who I've worked with or collaborated with, is you take such a fine art approach to the things that you make, but not necessarily that you have a style. Like your approach is always the same. Your process is the same, but the outcome isn't always identical, if that makes sense.
I think I'm also I'm problem solving in that this thing that I make, a client has to be able to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I'm building a website that is editable in a different way than someone else who just wants to make art.
Right.
Makes it.
Like we're working with a nonprofit right now making a website, and they have a volunteer or a part-time staff who's there doing probably 8 million things, and they're being compensated for a small number of hours or something like that. And so we have to think through, how do we make a website for them that looks good, but also it's easy to edit and update, and how can we train those people, even though they're doing it on a limited time, limited resources? How do we make all that happen?
In a way, I kind of feel like a really open-minded liberal designer, in that I'm not really, I mean, in the most shallow way, I don't ever think, oh, I don't like that about other work that I see.
Yeah.
I'm very much aware of the fact that could have been the perfect puzzle piece for a problem that they were solving.
The answer to that question.
The answer to the question. Yeah. I also feel like everyone should have a part in the project. My client should be very hands-on, but I should also be very much, I should guide them and dictate a certain element. There's just so many like complex parts to working with clients in a creative way that, if I see something, I don't automatically think, oh, I hate that font. I think that's cool that they chose that font, and I'd be interested to know more about the process behind it.
No, that makes sense. Talk about, in your process making things, whether it's photography or logos, websites, or even your own fine art projects, like your personal projects. What part of it is intuitive, that you're just kind of like, it's difficult just to describe and you're just making, and then, maybe versus intentional, as far as deliberate, strategic, calculated?
I veer much more toward intuitive. I feel like I can't always describe it. Teaching, because I teach more now than I ever thought I would, forces me to understand why I make things or do the things that I do. But it's hard to feel like I'm very intentional beyond, I know how we build websites, or I know how this client is using this logo, and so I need to make sure that it fits within those parameters. But it always feels very intuitive until I start to break it down and understand why I do what I do. I don't always feel like I know why, which is probably even why I don't feel like I understand what my style is, because I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't feel like I'm trying to copy any other style. So it feels it's hard to define.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like I see a lot of, you know, there's a big trend right now in photography with sharp shadows and pastel colors, and those trends come and go. And I think if I was trying to get into that niche market, then I would feel like I settled on a style. Mm-hmm. But I can shoot clients in studio or natural light, or I can shoot their products, you know, in different ways. And I don't feel like I'm ruining my aesthetic or this brand that I've created.
Yeah.
Probably food photography is the only thing that I feel like I feel like I have a style, and I want to get out of that. I want to experiment with more styles and be really versatile in that way.
So you are more intuitive than intentional, if on that scale, right?
And I think I'm intentional with everything around creating something.
Right.
Like, I am very intentional with my schedule and the amount of information that I gather from our client and how I interact with our client and the things that I connect with them on. And then when I finally design, it's very intuitive and I don't have a lot of guidelines.
So explain to the rest of the world how you involve me, although I am not a designer, photographer, artist. I'll call myself an artist, but not. I don't make visual things.
Yes.
How do you involve me, or how do you use me to like cover the gaps that you might be missing as you create things?
Got it. So I would say that,
or even give examples of like when that's happened.
Right. It would be easy for most designers listening or photographers or anyone that makes something, letters, you know, whatever, to listen to their client and then make the thing that the client wants. And I think the thing that has completely changed the way that I make things by collaborating with you is that you flip it around and you focus on the goals and who we're actually making this for, which is our customers.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you work creatively and you're making, you know, art for someone's home, they are your customer and it sort of ends there. But even if you're working on with an agency and your billboards are going to be put up in, you know, Hong Kong, they're trying to appeal to someone.
Right.
And so the thing that's been great about working together is that you have been able to, in a really captivating way, I believe, pin down our clients to make them focus more on their client and customer and getting their ego out of the way, which is how I really approach making things. Is I don't need to have my ego involved.
Right.
I can take feedback. We talked about that 2 episodes ago, and they need to do the same. They need to start thinking more about who they're serving and less about if they like the color coral.
Right. Yeah. No, that's really cool.
So I think you've been able to distill a process down and be a part of those meetings and keep things accountable and help our clients know that we understand business. You know, we aren't just like, oh, I don't really care how much money you make, or I don't care if you're profitable, but we very much hold our clients to that accountability of, you know, making sure that we're maximizing the budget of the project that they have. So I think overall there's a bit of a learning curve if you want to do something like this. You can't just be obsessed with design. I think you can if you have people in your business or within your workplace that can allow you to just focus on design. But I have very much had to learn a lot.
Yeah.
If I think about where I was when I graduated and the things that I talk about now or the things that I focus on now, it's really different. And I didn't intentionally learn anything. I think it was just picked up through conversation and listening to our clients and things
I think one of the things I've seen, you know, because we were dating when you go back to the beginning of the episode, you talked about being inspired by the other fine artists that you spent time with in painting classes.
Yep.
You know, when we were dating, I would come over to the art building while and somebody else was in a abstract painting class, and everybody's art is all over the place. And it was crazy to be in that space. And it was nuts that you were all given the same sort of assignment or whatever, but then it would have been very obvious if somebody was copying another person.
But I still feel like we were all too much feeding off of each other.
Really?
When I think of what is out there now in art, that was very much a small like bubble. And I think it just takes, I mean, there's so many different ways in which where we went to school, you're in isolation and you're not exposed to a lot. But I think other designers, you know, there's like a fine line between being constantly aware of what's out there and focusing on what's.
But I think so much of that, I think we find the real innovation that happens in branding or business or marketing or whatever is not necessarily just somebody being weird for the sake of being weird, but is really is somebody flexing their empathy muscles and being so in tune with the customers and the audience they're trying to build that you start doing very interesting things in a new kind of way, whether that's you change the wording of things or you describe something differently or you offer your service in a slightly different way to make a more connected, fun, meaningful experience for somebody. And I've seen you, as we work with small businesses, both of us have a lot of small business owners in our family, and we understand what that's like to care about the thing that you're doing, and that the business matters to you. And I've seen you, if you had sort of a crossroads where you could have been like, I'm going to really just develop my style and just do that thing, which works well for some creatives, versus I'm just going to become as helpful as I can to this audience, and we're just going to pay attention to them and figure out how do we help more. And also balance that and making things that you love and are proud of and are exciting.
For sure.
Which is cool. Talk a little bit about maybe tips for creatives because a big part of how you work and the way you're able to help clients and be intuitive is to kind of get your brain synced up with the client and the client's audience and customers. Talk a little bit about maybe from a creative perspective, but then also for if there's anybody listening to this who is hiring creatives, or is there people who are creatives, designers, photographers, whatever. How do you help that process go well? How do you help people sync up their brains, see the same thing, all of that? Yeah,
I think when and if you are a creative person and you're making something for someone else, I think that the first thing that you can do is learn and listen. So learn about what they do, ask questions, listen to them answering those questions. You know, you'll see patterns in which they might get off into a tangent, and that's something to learn. Understand how they use terms. So how do they talk about branding? What do they consider branding? What do they call the top navigation of a website? Do they call it a menu? Do they call it tabs? It's easy for creative people to kind of scoff at the way clients are, but that's how people are that don't do what you do. So, so those are some of the first things I would say. The second is just getting to know who they're trying to sell something to. And that's probably like the number one tip. And then get really synced up on style. So understand, like, if they created a mood board, ask questions. Don't just look at it. Don't make assumptions. Use a lot of time before ever creating something to dive a lot deeper and get questions answered. And don't make assumptions. Right. For those hiring creative people, I actually think you and I can somewhat, maybe we've just never talked about this, but there's a part in our branding on a budget class, which is we sell online. It talks people through how to prepare and gather inspiration and then create something and roll it out into your branding for like the least amount of money possible. But at the end, we talk about how to work with creatives in an affordable way. Yeah, because typically small businesses will be like, oh, my niece is in college and she knows how to use Photoshop, so she's going to do my logo. Right. So there's a part in the class where you mention if you don't give any feedback, or, you know, if you just let a creative person do what they do, they will create something great because you haven't limited them. I have 2 issues with that, and I'm starting to realize it. I'm sorry to bring it up publicly here. The first...
I feel like my point's being misrepresented, but you can go ahead.
Well, yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, but essentially it's like if you let them make something that they want to make, and you give them all of this information that you've gathered to create something that's informed,
right?
That if you don't provide feedback beyond, oh my gosh, my logo is spelled wrong, they'll rise to the occasion, which I agree with designers who are good.
Right.
I have written in my notes for this podcast to say, not all designers are made equal. They all don't have the same work ethic. They don't have the same skill set. They don't have the same communication tactics. And I know a lot of people who could take a lot of that advice and come up and end up with something that is not great, because people wait till the last minute. Designers could wait till the last minute, create something. They could rip someone off because they don't want to put in the time. They might spend too much time and create something that they want to make, but that's not what you want. You want something for your customer. So that was my first note. Not all designers are made equal. So you need to put in a little bit of work to figure out who you want to work with. Do they have a voice online? Are they using it? Are they talking about anything that you connect with, that you relate to? Are they talking about the industry that they're in? Are they sharing their work? Do they have roots in the community? Do they have a reputation online? There's so much that goes into it, apart from what kind of work have they chosen to display on their portfolio. I had a second point about something.
It sounds like we should probably edit that a little bit.
Yeah.
I still like I can see from Allie's face and
I've thought about
from
this a
what's
lot.
going on in my heart that this could be one of those things that we just
never agree on.
Argue about. We can talk about it at dinner tonight. Okay.
Good, because I'm making beef stew in the Instant Pot.
Okay, but for real though, the caveats to that piece of advice is when you do something free/cheap, that is different, and you should expect all of the problems that happen from like amateur things to happen, and you should just be thankful for that. What I watch people do often is they get a cousin, niece, friend, person they saw on Facebook when they're like, can someone recommend a designer? And then they're like, oh, this person I know needs help and needs stuff in their portfolio. Is they will be just as demanding as if they were paying professionals to do something else. And I think that's the expectation that needs to change.
Yeah, that's true.
If you're not paying for something and you're being a demanding client,
for sure,
it's best to just move on and go find a different person to make something for you than to keep making somebody tweak something forever.
For sure, yeah. And a lot, like I said, it's complex. Right. I guess I just think that if you were to work with me 5 years ago, is going to be different than working with someone else who is more experienced, or someone with 2 years of experience would be different than what I was like with 2 years of experience. So it's just, I just think overall people get a little bit lazy when they hire someone.
Definitely,
and there needs to be, we just hear so many of the horror stories of people who, especially when we started out, and they worked with someone who ripped them off, who was dishonest with their contract, fell off the face of the earth. And I am probably slightly jaded in that I think not all creative people are working on the same level. You know?
No, I feel you. I come from the experience of all of the interns that we've had, or even family members who we've worked with who have done stuff for us. We tend to be really good clients, and that we are very open and appreciative, grateful of their effort. And when they take risks and try something, we encourage that. Yeah, I feel like we give people good boundaries, and we've seen people produce some of their most interesting, best work inside of a smart, safe relationship.
For sure.
I think the other thing that is important as we sync up with our clients, or if you're a client, making sure that your creative person understands, is just being really clear on your goals as far as what you're trying to, if someone's just like, make me a logo, you're like, all right, we gotta talk for like 3 hours now.
Yeah. Unless you have that like very specialized look.
Right.
And then it's like, I'll just give you what I do.
Yeah. And so I think that's a big deal. And I should say the other thing would be, we find mood boards are a really good way to help two people get synced up on a visual aesthetic and style that's often difficult
to talk
to describe. Or, if someone was like, I really like flowers, and so make a logo, like that could turn into 800 different things.
For sure.
But if I was like, here's a bunch of logos that I like, you might start to connect the dots and be able to figure out how to give me something I'm not even skilled enough to ask for.
For sure.
Yeah. Which is really, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. One of the cool things that I see happen, and I would encourage artists who are listening to this who feel as if maybe they are more intuitive than calculating, it's okay to be that way. And some of the most interesting artists in the world are that way. They just make what feels like is the thing they should be making. It's important to pay attention to, it's okay to be that way. Yeah. For sure. But you just got to do some other things to make sure you're in the same headspace as your clients and the people who get stuff from you. Yeah.
That's a good combo.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's also one of the things that's probably most difficult to describe to others.
Yeah. I felt even like so sedated in the way I was talking about it today because I feel like I'm just not sure. Yeah. Like a lot of it is just very, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel this way. Maybe it's not true.
I think it's there's a I forget, I don't know the phrase of it, but people who are successful usually are wrong when they tell you what made them successful. So like when people start off their business and they had a ton of people help or like give them money or volunteer and work and whatever, and then they get really successful, they will often attribute their success to hard work and grit and determination. Yeah, right. But in reality, you're like, you had a bunch of like, advantages.
Like your dad gave you a loan. Like, come on.
Yeah. Like that would be a scenario where like if you couldn't be that successful with that type of advantage,
then it's not hard work.
Yeah. Like you're starting the 100-meter dash 90 meters ahead and congratulations that you finished,
For sure. Yeah.
Because if you didn't, you're just you got real problems.
Yeah, that's very true.
It's very true. That's good. No, but I was your face right now is like,
I have the
we want to talk about a lot of stuff, but we're not going to talk about very much stuff. I totally forget where we're going.
I derailed you with my smiles. Well, the one thing that we really want to discuss with you, listener, is...
This is an important message from producer Michael.
You need to... No, you don't need to. We would want to encourage you to leave a review of this podcast if you enjoy it.
Yeah.
If you hate listen, I mean, you can still leave a bad review. They're kind of interesting. Yeah. So
if you're like, I hate them, I'm just going to listen to it to be mad. And like
people do that. People hate follow, hate read.
Yeah.
Hate listen. It's very toxic, but
go through all of your social accounts and unfollow all the people who you hate that you're following. If you
get a bad feeling, unfollow that person.
Yeah, or block them, mute them, hide their Instagram story. Yeah. It'll be one of the best things for you.
Yeah. You don't have to go so far as to unfollow, but...
No, you can unfollow those people. But
you don't have to.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
But do it.
There's also a thing on Instagram now that lets you're like active or not. It like shows people if you're active. And you can turn that off. So if you're not into letting people know that, go into your settings.
If you're active?
Yeah, if you look back into your like messages, if someone's on the app, it'll say they're active.
Oh.
I know, right? So leave a review if you like it. Share it with people maybe that want to listen. We actually, I stopped looking at stats after the first season.
But producer Michael keeps a good eyeball on that stuff.
And he told us that we should encourage you.
Yeah, and he's like, we need to get some more reviews up on there.
So hit that subscribe button.
Smash the subscribe button.
Give me a thumbs up.
If you get a chance to, go through other people's phones and subscribe to the podcast on their phones.
If they don't have a
and then go
password.
leave a review on the iTunes app or whatever app they use to listen to the whole thing.
Love it.
Right?
Yep.
Yep.
Thanks for listening.